our signing class for this the class of 22. Obviously, this has been a unique transition and a fun process for me and my family, but also just for our staff and our players. Extremely excited about some of the guys we got to join the team here the last day, and honestly, really excited about the direction of the program and what we're going to be able to sign moving forward in this signing class. Obviously, goes without saying. Props to Don Johnson and JR and our recruiting staff for piecing a lot of pieces together in a short time period. Stability was unique, and piecing this group together was special. So that being said, I want to highlight a couple of these guys that we were able to bring on board from our 22 signing class. Linebacker Devin Jackson from Omaha, Nebraska. Outside linebacker Anthony Jones from Las Vegas, Nevada. D lineman Sir Mells from Henderson, Nevada. D lineman Ben Roberts from Salt Lake City, Utah. Linebacker Harrison Taggart from Draper, Utah. Cornerback Jaleel Tucker from San Diego, California. And then offensive lineman Michael Wooten from Simi Valley, California. So really excited about each one of those guys. I think they have some unique traits. Obviously they're tough football players. I know that there's an early emphasis there from the defensive side of the ball. And I think there's some exciting players that can come make an impact early. I feel really good about the ones that we ended up getting on board, and I'm excited to see who else we add to this puzzle as we keep moving forward. So with that being said, Nate, if you want to open it up.
Yes, sir. All right, we'll get right to questions. Let's start with James Crepia from the Oregonian.
Dan, in terms of Wednesday specifically, what went into getting Anthony to flip and getting Jaleel back on board when he had indicated that he would at least be waiting until either later this week, if not until February?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of sweat in the bucket and some trust and faith in those guys. Like I said, Don and JR and several people on our staff did a good job of, holding pieces together, and a lot of phone calls, connecting with parents quickly, and a little bit of trust. Obviously, Anthony was one that we were talking to late into the night, early in the morning, even on Wednesday. He was taking a test and then hopping back on the phone and then off the phone. So it was a fun process throughout the day. But I think he was just excited. He's a great example of a guy who's excited about the vision, especially how we have used edge guys and outside linebackers in the past, and saw an opportunity for himself here. Jaleel, several conversations in a short amount of time, I think gave him some comfort, and all the reasons he fell in love with Oregon before were all still here. And I think he's really was excited about the brand of football and defense that we're going to play moving forward.
Eric Scopel, 24/7.
Coach, I wonder just how many of these guys did you have any prior relationship with, and working on an accelerated timeline like you had to with the evaluation process? How much time did you spend just kind of looking at the class that was already committed and trying to figure out what worked, what maybe didn't, and obviously coordinating, getting some players to sign?
Yeah, some of them, there was a familiarity with some of these guys. But I'll say, a lot of these guys, this was some of my first contact in the last couple of days. Obviously, like I said, some really good players, so it got me excited to get out here. But this is a little outside the footprint of Georgia and where we've recruited. That being said, on my flight over on Sunday, I started texting these guys in the plane. So I hit up every single one of the commitments as we're coming over. If I could have called them, I would have, but that doesn't work in a plane ride. But the Wi-Fi was working, so we started with text messages. And I'll say this about this group: they were all extremely understanding. My first priority for everything when I got to Oregon was to sit down and try to get with some of our current players and speak to our current players and around those guys. And I'll say this class was super understanding about that in a short period of time, and knew that we were going to be pressed for time, but they showed some faith and us being able to build a relationship moving forward.
Matt Preem, 24/7.
Yeah, Dan, you mentioned a couple times Don and JR's importance. Just your thoughts on retaining those guys, and how do they help you? And because you've cited them a couple times now.
Yeah, ultimately, I'm walking into a situation where there was some unfamiliarity, and I think they were able to, prove their worth and their value, and how hard they were working to kind of keep the ball rolling in the right direction. And I think it's important when you move in to an organization, you want to make the right decisions. And they were able to give me some accurate information quick, able to tell me, a lot about the class and the direction of the class we were headed, and catch me up on some of these guys that I wasn't as familiar with.
Jerry Thompson, Ducks Illustrated.
Now, Coach, do you have any what you would term solid verbals that haven't signed yet, that may be signing before January, or a feeling of that? How's that going?
Yeah, I think that it's still fluid, but I do think there's some guys that we're definitely considering having jump on board before we get to January. It's something we'll continue to evaluate. And as soon as we're off this phone call, this Zoom, I'll be back on the phone with recruits tonight. So that's a priority moving forward, Jerry, but I do think there will be some, a potential for some additional pieces before the week's over.
James Crepia.
Beyond just tomorrow, Dan, how do you, like he's mentioned, a lot of guys, particularly on the defense, just one offensive signee at the moment. I know other commits lined up. Where do you see holes? If this is the foundation, whatever happens tomorrow is the foundation, where are the areas that you feel you need to address between now and the February period, particularly when you have guys declaring for the draft? Devin Williams just in the last 20, 30 minutes declaring for the draft. Where do you see areas that you'd like to see your staff ultimately address before February?
Honestly, in a lot of ways, it's probably too early for me to speak to it till we see some more of that transition. I think we'll always look to add across the board dynamic playmakers that can help us on offense and defense both. So with the way we're going to develop players here and the way they've been developed in the past at Oregon, I think you're always going to have guys that have the opportunity to move on and play at the next level. In reality, we have some target numbers each year. So we're going to try to get, close to the target numbers that I see ideal for our roster. And to be honest, we're relatively close at a lot of positions, but there's positions of need. But I don't know if I'm ready to be specific to each position.
Eric Scopel.
Coach, I've been kind of delicate with this, but what's the balance and what's your stance on recruiting players that maybe had committed to Georgia when you were there? Or do you continue to recruit them to Oregon, or is that off limits for you?
That's a good question. My job right now is to do the best job I can for the University of Oregon. And when it comes to football, my job right now is to do the best I can for the University of Georgia and help the University of Georgia. But I'm going to do what's in the best interests of Oregon.
Brandon Cameraman, KVAL.
Hey, Coach, I was just wondering, what has your recruiting pitch when you did talk to these players? What has your recruiting pitch been? What have you told them for those who are unfamiliar with you and you were sort of introducing yourself to them?
Yeah, I'll be honest, Brandon, it really hasn't been a pitch. We could have had a lot more people sign paperwork and send it across the board on Wednesday if that's what we wanted to do. It was important for me to communicate that, hey, we have time. Right. There's another signing day coming up. This isn't a sprint. Like I think I said this before, it's not a sprint to get it wrong. Let's walk and get it right. Let's make sure we're getting the right pieces added to our program. So it wasn't really a pitch. It's, a follow the track record that I've had in the past. Let's look at the resources that Oregon provides and the education that you can get here. And I think people can see that at face value.
Matt Preem.
Maybe a tough answer right now for you, but the size of this class, and I know it could maybe depend upon who leaves for the pros or whatnot, but do you have any kind of idea of just what the size could grow up to from a maximum standpoint? And you mentioned footprint of Georgia. What's the footprint of Oregon from a recruiting perspective, you feel like?
Yeah, I said this the other day. I think to answer your last question, we're going to recruit nationally, but I think it starts on the West Coast, and you want to start, with regionally first. The Northwest and the West Coast are going to be primary targets for us. That being said, we'll go anywhere in the nation because I think that we have a strong brand, and players want to be able to play at a place that has a strong brand. As far as numbers, yeah, again, it is probably too early to speak on that, Matt. I mean, it depends on attrition. It depends on what it looks like moving forward.
James Crepia.
To speak to some of that churn that's already taken place, Dan, I know you had amid everything else on your plate, you had the 7 experience the other night, and we're fortunate to turn him around. But the guys who entered either before your hire or subsequently, whether it's DJ James or Jason Jones, like they say, Devin just declaring for the draft, have you even had a chance to converse with any of these guys about their decisions to make whatever impression you can make. I mean, if somebody wants to go pro, they're going to go pro. But ultimately, if you had a chance to talk to any of them, even the guys who were in the portal, like a DJ, before you even were hired.
Yeah, I didn't get to have a conversation with anybody before I was hired. Once I got hired, there, like you said, there was a lot of those pieces that had already shook. Now that being said, since I've been able to visit with just about everybody, not everyone, but several of the guys, and I can promise you I've reached out to several of the guys and had good conversations. Ultimately, we're not going to trick people into staying here at Oregon. They have to make the decisions that's best for them and their families. There's a great experience and an opportunity here for people to be successful. And we're going to be excited about the people that choose to be a part of that. Seven is a great example of somebody who's just needed some time, needed an opportunity to sit down and sit in front of the head coach. And he understood, when he got a chance to do that, hey, look, there is a plan. And the only thing we're battling right now is that time. So I think just getting in front of each one of these guys, you'll probably continue to see opportunities for more guys to potentially stay, but we're gonna coach the guys that are here, and we're excited if some of those guys are going to reconsider and see what it looks like. But it's up to them ultimately, and it's up to what's in the best interest for us and our program.
Eric Scopel.
Coach, just how viable do you consider your ties to the West Coast? I know obviously you spent a lot of time in Arizona State, but is that those contacts still helpful here? And from a staffing perspective, will that go into trying to build this, trying to maybe acquire some guys with more connections out West?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly helpful, but it's a small spectrum. Now, that being said, we've signed some players in my time here at Georgia from the West Coast that I've been tied into as well, just because we've been able to recruit nationally. But we will have a focus on hiring staff that has ties, to the West Coast. That'll definitely be a piece of what we do going forward.
Matt Preem.
How important is the portal, you feel like, with moving forward and recruiting for you, to finish this class out? Or do you want to kind of focus mostly on high school guys?
Yeah, the portal is something that you can definitely use to strengthen your team. We're going to be really conscientious, moving forward. I think it's a tool. I think, there's been great teams across the nation this year that have proved that it can be valuable for your team. So when it fits, we want to be able to use it. We're not going to make our living there. It's not going to be the only place we recruit. I still believe in develop. The two things I'm looking for when I'm hiring these coaches moving forward is relationships and development. And when you talk about development, you're not signing finished products. You have to take players and take them to where you think they can be when it's all said and done. And that's going to be a big part of what we're doing moving forward, is developing young men. Will we end up looking in the portal for some answers? Absolutely. I think I owe it to the university and our program to do that, but it won't be the only place that we shop.
James.
Two specific positions by way of those target numbers, Dan. What is your optimal number of scholarship quarterbacks on a roster, particularly when at the moment you're set to have 3 in the freshman designation, third years and second years in there, but nevertheless, and receiver, where again, with Devin leaving, on paper, you're looking at, I know you can't confirm certain things, you're looking at potentially 9, I'll say potentially at the moment. So what is your optimal number at those two?
Yeah, it's fluid. I mean, obviously you have to have 1, right? And at receiver, you hope to have at least 3. We're going to make it fit for what we have. I've been in the past where we've carried anywhere from 4 to 5 quarterbacks on scholarship. And then, even some programs where it's been higher than that. Not every one of them can be on the field at the same time. So that's generally a position that's overstaffed for how many can actually play. But optimal numbers, that can be fluid as well. It's based on what personnel you're going to use. I think what we did here at Georgia is a great example of that. We got banged up at wideout this past year where we weren't able to play as many wide receivers, but we were able to play a lot of 13 personnel. If you look at our tight end room right now at Oregon, there's some really good tight ends that can line up and split out. So we have the ability to use that, and same thing with back. So that number can change, James, based on, what is here.
Time for 2 more. Let's go back to Matt.
How much has technology allowed you to be able to do this job, just 3 or 4 years ago? Because getting people on Zoom to do this kind of an interview didn't seem feasible 2 years ago. And now you can be face-to-face with people. And how much do you feel like this is a big tool for you to be able to connect with people face-to-face, and just technology allowing this transition for you?
Change the game, man. I mean, I'll talk about change the game, and, you know, especially in the homes that I haven't been in yet, you know. So I was on the phone with a mom just a little bit before we hopped on this call, and she was like, "Oh, it's so good to see your face. I wasn't sure exactly what you look like," you know. And same for me. You know, I had never met her. I obviously didn't get to go on the road recruiting, but it's just nice to be able to connect like that. And the fact that I can, whether it be interviewing coaches, you know, through a Zoom, or get on the phone on a FaceTime with kids, I mean, that's huge.
Last question, James.
With the various different reports by way of hires and whatnot, then with Kenny changing his profile picture, I think we can basically make that official. What can you say of what he brings to the table specifically and philosophically, go into that tree and that connection with the HUNH guys, and obviously the reports also of Matt joining the staff, now Marshall joining the staff. Can you confirm some of these reports, but Kenny specifically, since he was in the building today?
James, I think, you know, I can't confirm any of those reports, right? I would, we're excited about the staff we have coming aboard, but I cannot confirm anything right now at this time. But I'll tell you this, we're putting together a championship staff. Super excited about the guys that are coming on. We're being really diligent in our process, but there's a good group coming, and there's certainly more to come. And as soon as I'm able to speak on them, I'll be the first one doing it, I promise.